Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Brown. I'm a senior program coordinator here at USEA, and this is the Energy Stakeholder. I am joined today with Taylor Schindler, the Georgia Director for the Southern Renewable Energy Association. How are you, Taylor?
Very well, Melissa. I appreciate you all taking the time to visit with me this morning and talk about the Peach State.
Great, wonderful. Well, the Peach State is certainly creating a lot of buzz, like particularly the recent November elections. Given the 63 to 37% margin, what specific message do you believe Georgia voters sent to the Public Service Commission regarding the current state of utility regulation and rates?
Well, I think the margin certainly is indicative that it's all about affordability. Rates are too high, and frankly, rates are not lower than they were when Republicans were campaigning on these, affordability and probably more kind of economic populist style issues. And it was one that really you kind of saw um, a narrative throughout. You had some late money come in that really was able to drive home the message. And, frankly, Georgia Democrats have really gotten on the ball since the 2024 election. And I do think that this is probably going to be indicative of probably some future political races. I think that you kind of have this political realignment where voters under 40, it's probably even more crystallized under 30, where affordability and rates and a lot of the realistic kind of economic anxieties that are out there. I think folks are going to be looking a lot more at their wallets. And, frankly, you have kind of, especially in the younger cohort, these different kind of dynamic points that folks have lived through, whether it's 9/11 or the 2008 economic crisis or COVID, that has this kind of at least a little bit more kind of questioning with regard to institutions. And they're not as ideologically loyal as, obviously you have them on the fringes, but I think a lot of people, and that's really going to be indicative to, I think, elections going on into the 2026 cycle and beyond.
Oh, yes, thank you. And now just looking at the affordability versus policy, you touched on that. Customer utility bills average around 175 monthly. How did this high cost become such a primary focus of the election? And just overriding the incumbent argument about a 3-year base rate freeze.
I think you had a lot of folks that saw the rate base and, freeze and said, thank you. That's a good thing. But they're also looking back to the times where the commission has approved rate increases. And I think between some of those rate increases, and then you also have other investments, for example, Plant Vogtle, which was a fee on various bills for quite some time that people were seeing. And you're seeing a lot of these things where the investments being made, but it's not making its way all the way down to the consumer. And, folks were getting these record bills in July and August that really, stayed fresh in folks' minds. And I think it kind of fell on deaf ears.
Gotcha. And Public Service Commission members in Georgia are tasked with balancing reliable services and reasonable rates with the utilities need for a reasonable return. What policy priorities will the newly elected commissioners pursue to address this balance?
I think that really, if you look at Georgia, kind of, it just as a whole from the policy side, we, in addition to Northern Virginia, kind of are the canary in the coal mine with regard to data centers and the way a lot of those policies are being kind of fleshed out in the legislature and in various economic development avenues. The big one that I see is probably a more focused, whether it's a consumer advocacy side, but it's something that I'm hearing on both sides of the aisle. I think that you have a lot of folks who are listening to constituents and they're hearing it. And, frankly, we don't have a lot of variety as far as, things you can do to lower your bill if you're in a particular service area. And so I think you're going to definitely see an added emphasis on that. I think you're going to probably see folks a lot more interested in the regulatory and also on siting and permitting. I think that we're starting to kind of venture down the conversation, at least from the president and others in the administration who have talked about co-location. But we've got the opportunity to really thread the needle, I think, a good bit on this economic policy, but we've got no time to waste. And so I think that you're going to have to see that. But frankly, I think people also just want to be talked to a little bit more directly. I think that's the other part that you're starting to see a little bit more added emphasis with, whether it's social media or other opportunities to interface with the utility. Folks are finding the those places and they're finding similar voices with it as well.
Oh, yes. And what's notable about these elections are they were off-year elections with that also coincided with high-profile municipal races in cities such as Atlanta and all throughout the Peach State. How much did the unique local-driven turnout mechanism influence the statewide results, and what does this suggest about the importance of down ballot and the issue of energy as a whole?
Right. You obviously had a very popular, mayor in Atlanta, Andre Dickens, on the ballot. In addition to, as I've said, a couple of counties as far as pretty reliable red counties with regard to presidential and gubernatorial elections that flipped blue on a, nominal basis, 51-49, 52-48. With those municipal elections, they certainly were a factor. To be honest with you, looking at just the broad margin, yeah, I'm not naive to think that there weren't people who voted it red in November of 2024 who maybe went to the other side just to shake it up in certain regards. And, I think that that's really, certainly was a big impact. And, I think that's it. But I also think that the Democrat message discipline with regard to rates, and we're tired of it. And it really kind of, with regard to other parts of the economy with inflation, and people are feeling it from a lot of angles right now, and it was really something that I think you were able to really turn the vote out. I think that that's probably something, and I know talking to folks that are higher up in the Republican Party here in Georgia have spoken about, the effort to get out the vote. And there was certainly a very strong one with regard to the state party and Governor Brian Kemp's operation. But, it still was kind of lagging behind some of the efforts that we saw through, obviously, Democratic Party of Georgia and some other third party entities.
Great. And now I'm just looking to the future with grid policy. There has been a focus on clean, reliable energy resources. How will the new PSC composition affect Georgia's energy mix, major infrastructure projects, and decisions on future rate cases?
I think that obviously anytime that new folks are elected, it can be dynamic. I am very confident in the ability of the members of the PSC, the, three Republicans who are on there. I know two served in the legislature, and a natural kind of give and take there. I think as well, and just knowing through the work we've done with Georgia Power and some of the EMCs in Georgia, there is investment being made. I think the bigger piece is us working together and getting more on the siting and permitting side, because a lot of this policy is very new. And like, as I said, with regard to data centers, I think everyone's very much focused. And I know we have here, our Speaker of the House appointed a special committee on the resource management that's focused on really the energy and water demands with regard to that. And so I really think that it's going on now. I think that you're going to see probably a more added emphasis on the consumer side, and also looking at those different dockets as far as you go down. I think that hopefully you'll see the same effort, if not more, for that kind of all the above energy generation approach. And as I said earlier, we've got such a finite amount of time to really get this policy right that we really need to be working together regardless. And it's my hope, and this is a lobbyist dream, that we can become very much so, very nonpartisan on these issues, because it's going to end up where you're having to make very difficult decisions with regard to, multi-million dollar investments and the consumer balance as well.
Great. And what steps can the PSC take to better communicate the complex components of utility bills and the stuff behind the scenes to the average residential consumers?
I think that the PSE and really their partnerships with the various utility providers, I think that that's something that, and I can say this, I'm a member of an AMC here in Georgia, but I've also been a Georgia Power member and can tell you that, two power bills are certainly not created equally. Some you can see a lot of your usage on it, and you can see other variables. I would encourage them to work, and it's probably, again, probably on the consumer advocacy side, to really make those things a little bit more simpler and easier to digest for an average person, where we're not just throwing a fee onto something and that's just what it is, and here's a very complex explanation of it. I think that if there's a fee on a bill and somebody's able to justify it as far as how a future investment can benefit a ratepayer, that really needs to be the emphasis. And I think between that and, again, I think that the other part is people only really think of their provider when their bill comes, and they're not thinking of the different strategic investments in the form of transmission or other things in communities that they're really helping bring there. And so I think that's really, if there's a sweet spot there you can find, but really just making it to where it is very much and very simple for, if my 5-year-old can look at it and she knows numbers and can figure out things, I think that's a good place to start.
Great. And our last question, if anyone wants to learn more about SREA and what you do, and in case they want to get involved, where would they go?
You go to southernrenewable.org. We are in, I guess, gosh, we're in 7 states now. We're kind of debating membership wise whether not to expand into a few more here in the southeast, but you can really see us. We work very much so hand in hand with American Clean Power, also trying to get more granular with regard to our various engagement with different farm entities, whether it's farm bureaus or forestry associations. But you can find us all online at SREA. And like I said, my name's Taylor Schindler. Our executive director, Simon Mahan, though, he's the one you want to follow on every platform that you can. Simon is, he puts a fun spin on everything. He's been able to make very dense energy policy, something that I've really come to enjoy. And just, he really just is able to explain it in ways for folks that, I think is really, really encouraging. But it also makes you kind of intrigued and makes you want to take a little bit, probably deeper look into your power bill and some other things that maybe were a little more tedious in the past. But hopefully we can make it fun and more importantly, build enough of it for future generations.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Taylor, for joining us today. Thank you to our listeners for watching. Keep up to date with USEA's activities at usea.org and stream us wherever you listen to your shows.